Today I'm going to recap another one of my classical over-the-board tournament games, which I recently played in Kavala in Greece. We'll focus on the key moments and what you can learn from them. Now, one thing about this tournament was the extremely large number of talented, underrated junior players taking part. And today's opponent is no exception. His rating may say 1550, but I can assure you he's a lot stronger than that. This is actually a very common phenomenon among junior players. Their rating and their level of ability often don't match because they're improving so quickly. But anyway, let's jump into the game. I've got white and I start out with e4. Black replies with c5, the Sicilian defense. And against that, I like to go for the open Sicilian. And black chooses the knight-off variation. I play f3 here. The idea is that I want to go for a setup with bishop to e3, queen to d2, and queenside castling, the so-called English attack. But if you play bishop to e3 straight away, then the move knight to g4 is rather annoying. So f3 just prevents that. We get e5 from black. The knight had to retreat. I get to play bishop to e3. This bishop is very strong, guarding the dark squares. Bishop to e6 from black, queen to d2, continuing with my plan, and now this move, h5. I've seen this a lot recently. This seems to be a very trendy way for black to play against the English attack. Let me show you the idea of h5, because if black plays in an alternative way without h5, let's say with kingside castling, and then white castles queenside, and black just develops with knight bd7, white will go for a kingside pawn storm with g4. This is the move that h5 is looking to slow down. With h5 on the board, g4 is quite hard for white to achieve, and black may actually be looking to leave their king in the center. So let's see what happens. I castle queenside anyway. Black plays knight bd7, and now I play king to b1. I'm really just waiting to see what black's intentions are. If black is going to castle kingside after all, well then I'm going to need to force through the kingside pawn storm by playing, for example, h3, rook to g1, also that I can eventually play g4. But that's only if black castles kingside. If black does leave their king in the center, then I'm going to need to open up the center, and pushing pawns on the king side won't be of much use. So king to b1, I'm just waiting to see what black's intentions are. Queen to c7 doesn't really give me any extra clues. I'm still not quite sure what black is really intending. So I play h3, just getting that move in so that g4 can be more possible later. And now here's another move that I was waiting for, b5. This allows me to play a standard middle game plan against the knight off, which we're about to see, starting with knight to d5. The idea of this is that really black has to take this knight, which is what happened, and then white gets a pawn to d5, which can become an anchor point for this knight to come into c6 with an outpost. This is a thematic middle game idea, and this is why it's important to not only study the opening moves, but also these thematic middle game ideas. Plans that you can employ once you're out of your memorized opening preparation, because this is a standard idea. Now, it's not possible after black's next move, rook to c8, because if I play knight to a5, it turns out that this knight is actually possible for black to capture due to a tactic, which is also thematic. Capturing on d5, because now the queen is overloaded defending the knight and also defending the pawn which was on d5. So if I take the knight, then this knight drops. So I can't play this plan yet, but it is what I'm trying to achieve. A very interesting move here actually for white is c4. This is not really something that I considered during the game, and this is why it's so valuable to review your games after you've played them, because this is an idea which could definitely occur again in my future games. It seems to just drop a pawn, but the point is that after black takes the pawn, if that's what he does, well, there's actually a couple of moves you could play here. You could even take the pawn straight away, because black can't take back due to rook to c1. And now the queen can't stay on a square which also defends the rook. So white regains the material with interest. The other idea is that you play rook to c1 straight away without capturing the pawn first. And now there's quite a lot of pressure on the c-file. This is quite counterintuitive to open up the queen side like this, but I suppose it makes sense actually, because it's quite hard to open up the king side or the center. So white, even though white has put their king on the queen side, actually looks to open up the queen side because that's the best way to gain activity against black's forces. So now rook to c4 is coming next, and with the queen on the c-file, it becomes a bit uncomfortable for black. Quite interesting, but that's not how the game continued. Instead, I played rook to c1 straight away. The idea of this is that I want to free up my queen. Like, I want this queen to be able to move without needing to guard c2, because black does have quite a lot of pressure on c2 now. So again, I'm trying to play knight to a5, and I'm hoping that rook to c1 is going to make that a bit more possible. Knight b6 from black. Now this pawn on d5 is attacked twice, so I really have to eliminate this one. Black takes back, of course, and I still can't really play knight to a5 because of the same problem. Black can take on d5, and my knight is without a defender. So the plan I came up with here was to just finish my development. Bishop to d3. This gets an exclam because it doesn't look possible at first, because it seems to leave the pawn on d5 undefended. But it is still defended tactically, because if black takes it, then I can play bishop to f5. And now the rook on c8 is attacked, and the knight is attacked as well, winning material. So one idea also is to play the bishop into f5 anyway, which will bother this rook on c8. So for this reason, black played g6. Now bishop to f5 isn't possible. And now I'm thinking to myself, well, I really actually need to open up the center, because that's the way that black has played. It doesn't look likely he's going to castle kingside now, given all these moves that he's made with his kingside pawns. If he did castle kingside now, then I think I'd be able to play g4 and break apart his structure quite easily. So that's why here I played rook h to e1 with the intention of playing f4, opening up lines in the center. If you're enjoying the video so far, do subscribe to the channel. I do many different types of content on chess, including reviews of my own games like this one, but also tips on how to improve, reviews of master games, and plenty more. So back to the game. Here black played bishop to f8. This makes a lot of sense because the bishop on e7 is pretty much out of the game. It's stuck behind its own pawns, so he's looking to reroute it to a more useful location. The threat here actually is to play bishop to h6 with a skewer of the queen and the rook on c1. So realizing this, I played g4, which is the best move, and it also looks to open lines on the king side if that's what black is intending. But most importantly, it prevents bishop to h6, because if bishop to h6 were played, then I can play g5 with a fork. So black didn't do that. Instead, black played knight to d7. And you can see now that my plan, I think, is quite clear. I want to play f4 and try and just take advantage of the fact that my rook is on the same file as the black king. So that's what I do. f4 comes. Black plays bishop to g7. So now this bishop could become strong on this long diagonal. I finally get to play knight to a5 with the idea of bringing the knight into this outpost, because I don't really want to capture here yet. Like if I capture here straight away, then black recaptures with the knight, and his structure is actually quite solid. Like it's not easy to shift this knight away from this strong square. And it's for this reason I played knight to a5, so that I could play knight to c6, so that when I capture here, I'd also have this pressure with the knight from c6 on e5. It's important, I think, to hold the tension in this way. You know, I think a lot of players would try opening up the center, but then after knight to e5, they'd realize that it hasn't actually worked. So it's good to hold the tension until it's decisive to release it. So hence knight to a5, and now black sees what's about to happen. He understands that I'm looking to open the center, so he's seeking shelter with his king on the queen side now. Now this is a mistake because I get to play the knight into c6 with check. I'm sure this is what he must have expected. And king to c7 was his idea. But it's at this moment where it's correct now to play c4. And this is what I do. c4, opening up lines towards the black king. So now the rook from c1 is creating threats on the c file as well. Black moves with their king further towards the queen side, looking for shelter. But now I'm able to open up, and it's at this moment where I've got a really strong opportunity to gain a decisive advantage. I spent some time here. I looked at a number of different moves, because I did realize that this pawn on b5 was very weak, and there's a number of ways to try to target it. One way is with rook to c3, coming over to b3, but I decided that this didn't really work because of e4. This targets the rook now. And if I follow through with rook to b3, black can eliminate this bishop, and after I take back, there's knight to c5 at the end with a fork. So that's no good. The alternative plan, which I should have gone for, was rook to e4. I think I didn't like the look of knight to c5 here, but I should have calculated a bit further, because this turns out to be absolutely fine for me. I can play rook to b4 anyway, and yes, black can eliminate this bishop, but I still end up with this pressure on b5, which black can't do anything about. So probably just a case of not calculating far enough, not being disciplined to calculate that one extra move. The move that I played instead, I felt was more forcing, and it was knight to e7. So this attacks the rook, and what I was expecting here was that black was going to exchange, after which I'd have a lot of pressure along the open c-file. Rook to c6 could be one idea. He can't defend this with his other rook because the knight guards that square. But the other plan that I showed earlier with rook to e4 and rook to b4 would have been a lot stronger because of this pressure on the weak b5 pawn. But anyway, that's not how the game continued. Knight to e7 instead, and black surprised me here with the move rook to c5. Now, I didn't actually see this coming, but it is a very strong way to play, just holding up my attack. I was thinking that he was going to have to initiate this capture, but instead he puts it on a square where the rook is defended, and a capture would benefit black, I think. Right, again, it's quite hard for me to keep opening up lines with this strongly placed knight on c5. And it's because of this that I decided to play a very double-edged move here, and that move was b4. Now I'm opening up lines around my own king, which could come back to hurt me later, but I decided that black was in more danger than I was, and that I had pieces better placed to take advantage of this. I mean, it does look scary. I mean, black takes here, and now I'm going to be able to infiltrate with the rook into c6, getting the queen to move, maybe putting the queen behind the rook. Like once my rook's on c6, I put the queen behind it, and there's a lot of threats for black to deal with. But here black played the best move, which is to open up on f4. So interestingly, that move, f4, which I'd played several moves ago, if you remember, to try and open up the center, all the way back here, it's actually black who ends up opening up the center to his benefit. E takes f4, I mean, it's not so much about winning a pawn, but it's more about the threats which are now coming on this long dark squared diagonal. Queen to d4 is a big threat here. So now I don't actually have time to play the move that I was intending earlier, rook to c6, because black would reply with queen to d4, and now I'm just too weak on the dark squares. Queen to a1 check is the threat. Now, this is the downside of playing that risky b4 advance earlier. So this is the critical moment of the game, and it's so vital in chess to get the critical moments right. Before I move on and show you what happened in the rest of the game, just a reminder that I work with high-achieving adults to boost their results in chess through the Road to 2000 Chess Mentorship Program. You can check that out and apply to work with me by clicking the link in the description below. Now, of course, I can't work with everyone. My time is very limited, so please only get in touch if you're really serious about this, if you've got the time and the resources to dedicate to chess improvement. But if that does sound like you, then the Road to 2000 Chess Mentorship Program could be the thing that you've been looking for to get you the types of results in chess that you didn't think were possible. Click the link in the description below to check that out. Now back to the game. I understood that queen to d4 was my problem, so I looked to prevent that indirectly with queen to c2. Now the black queen has to stay guarding c7 and c6. If the queen moves away, then my queen will infiltrate with decisive effect. In the game, my opponent blundered at this point with pawn takes g4, and this allowed me to play the decisive move knight to c8. This is the move that my opponent must have missed. You can't take the knight. Well, you can, but it's going to result in massive material loss. And the point is really that the black queen needs to move away. And if it moves away to any square, it can't keep guarding both c7 and c6. Now, my opponent also had a strong reply though, earlier, after queen to c2. He could have played the amazing knight to e5. The point is that if I play the same move in the game, knight to c8, black can reply with knight to c4, ignoring the threat on the queen. Because if I take the queen, knight to a3 is actually checkmate. Notice how powerful this dark squared bishop is on this long diagonal. And yeah, that's lights out. That's the end of the game. Whereas if you take the knight, then black is able to capture now on c8 with a decisive material advantage. Notice that this bishop is actually pinned in front of the white queen. So the critical moments, they're really what decides most chess games. This is the sequence that my opponent missed though. And after he captured here and I played knight to c8, it became decisive in my favour. So the queen was able to enter, king to a8, and there were a number of moves that I was considering here. One very tempting move is bishop takes b5, and this does work, but you have to calculate quite a lot. Of course, black can't take the bishop because that would result in mate in 1, but you need to look at not just the move that you think your opponent might play, but all of the forcing moves. And what I didn't like the look of after this was rook takes c8, leading to a critical line. Now, if I were to take the black queen, then I think all of my advantage is gone, because black would take my queen. But you have to spot this intermezzo, bishop to c6 check, and then after black takes here, you also don't take back, but you give this check on a5 first. This was the complexity that I didn't want to deal with, so instead in the game, I just played queen takes d7, just taking the knight, cashing in some material, and keeping all of the threats alive. Now, my opponent played rook takes h3, and it's very tempting to play bishop takes b5 now, because it would seem that black didn't have that same counterplay that I just showed. But bishop takes b5 is a blunder, because there's an amazing move here for black. You really can never relax in chess until the score sheets are signed. And that amazing move is rook to b3 check. I'm sure that this is what would have happened in the game if I had played bishop takes b5. The point is that this rook really needs to be taken, and after it is, queen to a1 is possible. And white can't escape all the checks. Black will keep on checking forever until white concedes that there's no escape and that the game is a draw. So this would have been an absolute tragedy. Fortunately, I took my time in this position and noticed the problem with bishop takes b5, and instead played a different forcing move in the form of knight to b6 check. This is a clearance sacrifice. Remember, I am a knight up because I took that knight of black's earlier. And after black takes this one, which is the only real move, because if you play the king over here, it's going to result in queen to c7 checkmate. But if the knight is taken, as it was in the game, then the rook gets to the 8th rank and black has to block with the queen. I just took the queen and started cashing in by capturing pawns. Now, as you see this, you'll notice that I keep up the checks, keeping the pressure up. I don't want to relax here. I want to make it as difficult for my opponent as possible. There is still some counterplay here. I mean, these pawns could become dangerous in some situations. This bishop is also under attack. So I want to avoid any possible counterplay and just keep the pressure up on my opponent. Let's see how. So another check, and then another check, and then capturing another pawn with check. Another check. Every move is a check. I don't want to capture pawns without check because that will allow black to potentially get their own counterplay in. Now I'm able to take on f7, and it was at this point that my opponent resigned. I can actually take this bishop, and if black takes my bishop, then I can win the rook with check, and that would be enough to end the game, I think. Instead, my opponent resigned at this point. But wow, what a sharp, double-edged game. Especially in games like that one, which are filled with so much danger and complications, it helps to have frameworks to simplify your thinking. Check out this video next, where I share an approach which I call the Solar Method. It's a 5-step framework which will help you see more of what's relevant on the board automatically.